Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mondays with Amanda. Can you guys hear me? When you pop on, say hi, tell me what you're up to this morning, and if you can hear me. Awesome. Welcome. I'm so looking forward to today because I'm kind of a book geek and I'm excited to, over the next few weeks, talk to you about one of my most favorite books, Rhythmic Movement Method. Wonderful. Great. So everybody can hear me. All right. Welcome again to Mondays with Amanda. I am a learning and development coach and parent educator. I'm the founder of Whole Brain Gym, where I design and install sensory pathways and teach educators and families how movements develop the brain. And today specifically, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite books. I found out about this book about 3 years ago, and it's really changed the way that I see kiddos with behavior challenges or difficulties in learning or focus, and have learned how powerful it is that simple baby movements can help develop, connect, and mature the brain. And so today we're going to be talking about this foundational book called the Rhythmic Movement Method, which you can see it here up on my board. So everybody will know what it is that I'm talking about today, what we're going to kind of go over, and I'm really hoping to inspire you to get this book, to learn more about these movements and how they can help your kiddo as well as help yourself. I actually do them every single day, and they're an incredible way for me to ground, to be able to connect with myself, and to be able to push pause a lot easier because I too am connecting my brain and calming my nervous system. All right, welcome everybody. So good to have you today. Let me make sure that I am live within the group. I'm pretty sure I am. Perfect. Great. So let's just get started. All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Again, as you jump on, let me know if you're watching live or replay. Let me know as we go through this information if you have any questions or anything stands out to you, right? So as we're learning together, and I'm really inviting you, if you feel so, to read this book as well. To get it, there's a link right on my webpage at wholebraingym.com under the resources. You can link that right over to Amazon and get yourself one of these books. We're going to be studying a new book every single month for Mondays with Amanda, and I think that's going to be a great way to help support you as you are on this search for knowledge to help your kids as well. Welcome, everybody. Perfect. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. All right, so our book this month is the Rhythmic Movement Method. One of the things that's super exciting about doing it this month is that I am Candy, one of our other coaches within the program. She's an occupational therapist, and we are creating Sensory Movement Mini Course 2.0. So if any of you guys have bought the Sensory Motor Mini Course before and have been using it, you will get free access to this new workshop that we are putting together. And it's going to be on Friday, March 19th at 7 Mountain Time. And I'm hoping this month, as we talk about at these rhythmic movements, that you'll be inspired to come and take this workshop. So right now we actually are having an early bird special. So if you want to get into this 2.0 mini course, it's only $49 until March 10th. And then after that, it will go to the regular price, which is now $97. We're expanding this workshop and helping you have even more tools to help your kids with these neuro movements, these movements that help connect, calm, and mature the brain. So you definitely want to get to this workshop if you want help in this area with your kiddos. What I want you to know is that Candy, who works with kids every single day, she has now implemented with every family that she works with, especially the new families that she works with. She sets them up to begin these rhythmic movements before she even is able to meet with them for the first time, so that the parents have something really physical that they can do with their child that's simple and easy and really quick, that helps organize the brain for their kids. And I found this same thing working within our coaching program with the clients that I work with, and the tremendous improvement it's had on kiddos. Now, here's the one caveat. It's something that has to be done every day. And so sometimes that's really difficult for some families. But in this workshop, we're going to be going over ways to get these movements into your daily life without it taking much time. All right. Welcome, everybody. If you are new to the group, please say hi. Make sure you let me know if you're watching hashtag live or hashtag replay. The more that you comment and interact during this live, the more this will go out to other people in the group. So you're helping me as you interact here and give me your thoughts and your insights and your understandings. Okay, perfect. So let's get started. First off, rhythmic movement method. Okay, and the author of this particular book is Dr. Harold Blomberg. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him because his story is really fascinating. So he started out as a medical doctor in the early 70s. Then mid 70s, he went into psychiatry. He was working at a hospital and getting all of the intern and all the work he had to do to get into the field of psychiatry. And during this time, he learned about a movement specialist in Sweden. So he's originally from Sweden. He learned about a movement specialist named Kirsten Lindy. She's self-taught, and she's actually a photographer, but she had been working with kids with neurodevelopmental challenges, with cerebral palsy, with learning difficulties, kids who are on the spectrum. And she had been watching children, especially babies actually, and how they moved when they were just tiny. And these are these automatic baby movements, these rhythmic movements that babies make. And she became very curious about it. And so she created a pedagogy, basically kind of a system, a way of helping kids move to help mature and organize their brain. Now, she didn't exactly know what it was doing in the brain, but she was getting phenomenal results. So when Harold learned about Kirsten Lindy, she went to visit him and to see her about his own challenges from having polio as a kid. And it was remarkable to him. He had such a huge difference in his ability to move his body and his organization of his brain. So he thought, can I just watch what you're doing? And he asked permission to watch her do these movements. For about 3 years, he followed her work and was fascinated by it, that he took this rhythmic movement back to the mental hospital that he was in and started working with patients who had schizophrenia, and had remarkable, again, results with especially those who had schizophrenia for over 10 years, that barely interacted with other people, were not able to do occupational therapy or really take care of themselves or have any interest. And it really was fascinating to him that as he taught these patients rhythmic movements, they started to engage with their outer world better. They started doing occupational therapy and they started taking care of themselves. Now, over time, that particular hospital didn't love what he was doing. He eventually was kind of exonerated by the National Health Board for doing incredible work, but he had to leave that hospital because there was just too much tension in regards to this movement. And he tends to the side of naturalistic, holistic ways of helping kids. You know, if you can stay away from meds, then here's one of the ways that could be very, very helpful in doing that. But even if your kiddos are on some medications, that's okay. The movements help as well, and they're phenomenal. So he started working with kids and ended up teaching workshops, and writing this book. Okay, so that is the author of the book. He honestly just passed away in May, which was kind of disappointing because I would have loved to have met him. But what I want to talk to you a little bit about is how to learn a book. Here's one of the things I kind of wanted to teach you because I've studied classics and books forever, and I have a kind of a system by which I learn a book, and this might be helpful to you. And so I wanted to teach you, first off, when I have a new book, how instead of reading it from cover to cover, I do something called I learn the book. And so I was going to walk you through what I did with this book. Just takes a couple minutes, and then we're going to go into what is it, why is it so important. We'll talk about this, and we're going to specifically be talking about chapter 2 today. Okay. But to learn a book, if you get a new book and you want to know, God, do I really want to read this? Or do I want to just get an overview of this? What's important for me to know? What I do when I learn a book is the first thing that I do is I go in and I read any of the introductory, the preface, anybody that wrote, about the book or has an opinion about the book. Okay, so I read all the introductions and things like that. And then what I do is I look over each one of the chapters and I look at the different names of those chapters, right? And see how they organize the book. Like, where's the priority? They talk a lot about in this book about primitive reflexes, and these rhythmic movements help integrate the primitive reflexes. And they talk about this throughout the book, and they connect it to the brain. So lots of different levels of the brain we're going to talk about this month. That's really exciting. That helps you understand what's happening in the brain and why is rhythmic movements helping kids improve language skills, improve stuttering, improve movement and balance and emotional regulation. So they talk about all these different things. So there's 18 chapters in this book. Hold on. Yes, 18 chapters in this book. And you can see as you go through it, he has a different way of looking at challenges with kids. Like I said, he tends to the holistic side. So he compares, this habit or this idea of putting kids on medication without trying other means or doing both at the same time. He talks about different environmental challenges that might be adding to kiddos who are on the spectrum or kids who are just challenged, right? There's a portion in here where he talks about food intolerances and how with kids on the spectrum, if they are still eating wheat and dairy, the rhythmic movements don't have as high of an effective rate. They are not as effective for those kiddos, or it takes them a really long time to get that because he talks about how wheat and dairy kind of create inflammation, and specifically inflammation in the cerebellum. He talks about each part of the brain and how these movements activate the brain, how it creates neural nets in the brain so that you can communicate and you can stay focused. A lot of kiddos, when they don't get the right type of stimulation, they have a hard time focusing, paying attention, being able to follow through on multi-step directions. So I look at all of these things here, talking about rhythmic movement training and reflexes and psychosis. He talks about that. The prefrontal cortex and rhythmic movements, like how does rhythmic movement help us access the prefrontal cortex, especially with kiddos who have executive functioning challenges, kids who have ADHD or ADD. How these movements help us access, link up the brain and mature it. So I read the summary, the preface, I look over each one of the chapters, and usually some of those chapters will pop out with me, and so I'll star them. I might go, I definitely want to look at that one and that one. And then I tend to go to the back of the book. And, for some people, you might like, I can't believe you're doing that. But for a learning book like this or a self-help book, I go back and I read kind of the conclusion of the book, right? And any case studies. For this one, there's case studies, right? So I go back and I read the conclusion of the book. I looked over each one of the movements that are in the book, right? So in this book, it shows you all the different movements. And then the last thing I do is I generally go through each chapter and I read the introduction paragraph and the summary paragraph, just so that I can get an idea of what's going on in this whole book. And that usually takes me, a good hour, maybe 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, depending on that. That helps me know kind of the big picture of the book and then where I feel like I want to go next. Okay. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's how I learn a book. And I have friends coming in to visit me. So if you need that written down, if you want me to write down how I learn a book, I can tell you that again. Okay, but let's get to some of your comments and questions here. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. I love, love, love rhythmic movement. Yes, they're very powerful. Yeah, my kids love rhythmic movement. My kids ask for their massage at the end of the day. Yes. So one of the things that they have found over time is that these movements, kids are really willing to be compliant with them, especially if you are doing these movements with them from a heart of peace. So if you've been in any of my workshop or have watched my lives, we talk about this idea of the heart of peace or the heart of war. So if we're trying to do these movements with our kids and we're stressed and overwhelmed and we feel like we're just trying to cram one more thing in the day, that has an effect on your nervous system as well as your child's nervous system. And it can trigger us to get out of social engagement where we don't want to do the movements. But if you can get yourself grounded, push your pause button as a mom and just set aside 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the most, to do a few of these movements before bed. In fact, many families put them into their nighttime sleep routine. Okay, we had one of our members talk about how dad tells jokes during the time that they're doing these movements, and it's become such a part of their evening. Their daughter sleeps incredibly well. That's one of the other side benefits of all of this. We might be doing it for attention and behavior, but many kids are really having an easy time falling asleep and staying asleep the whole night, okay? Because it's calming the nervous system, it's connecting and linking up the brain, and so just overall, it's maturing the brain. Okay, hi everyone. You never know when I might decide to send a little something. Jen says that. Yes. Yes, we do have prizes. So Jen's kind of saying, hey, if you're engaged a lot, then we could send you a prize. That's awesome. I never thought about it with treating schizophrenia. Super cool. Yeah, it is really awesome. Right? So it's linking up the brain. And this book explains it pretty well. And in layman terms, right? It's not too medical. It's something that we as parents who might not be totally fascinated with the brain, but we want to learn those things because of our kids. It's a really, really relatable book. Okay. Oh man, dairy is one of the only sources of protein my picky eater eats. So that would be a really cool thing to talk about, Kirsten, inside the coaching program. So I can talk to you a little bit about that and its cause in what happens in the gut and inflammation that could really be a part of helping your little guy. Okay, any other questions? Perfect. All right, so what is rhythmic movement? For those of you who are new, basically rhythmic movements are programmed baby movements from the brain stem. So what we have in our brain is a part of our brain that's just automatic, right? Like we don't have to think about keeping our heart beating or our stomach digesting or intestines, right? Or our heart beating. That's a part of the autonomic system. It's just a part of our body that just keeps us alive. So our brain stem is a part of our body that has programmed into it innate movements that ultimately help us develop our brain. Now, when a baby is born, the brain's not fully developed. We already know this. The baby can barely do anything except keep the body alive, right? And so there's actually movements programmed into the brain so that when the child gets certain stimuli, they have a specific movement in their body. Okay, those are called reflexes. So we've got the rhythmic movements and we have reflex movements. The reflex movements help keep us alive. So one of those reflex movements are the baby's first breath. When the baby feels like it, or if it hears a loud noise, it reflexes out, and this is called the Moreau reflex. And then takes a breath, and then it cries to get help. We have other reflexes in the hands. We've got reflexes in the mouth, which is the very first one because that baby learns to suck, right? You don't have to teach a baby how to suck. All you have to do is kind of rub the cheek and that baby turns to that. And that's a reflex and the baby starts sucking, okay? So those reflex movements keep the baby alive. The rhythmic movements help that baby develop the brain to its highest functioning and help that baby build the muscle tone so that it can eventually roll over, get up on his hands and knees, start to walk, and change those reflexes into postural lifelong reflexes. Okay, so you go from primitive reflexes to postural reflexes so that baby can balance, walk, skip, throw his arms out if that child trips, right? There's these reflexes that help us stay erect and to be able to move in this gravitational world. When the baby's in utero, it's in water and it's getting all sorts of stiff sensory stimuli, but it's in water. And so the baby doesn't have these same movements developing in water. But once that baby comes through the birth canal, which is one of the really important reasons why we want as many kids born naturally, is because as they're moving through the birth canal, it actually triggers specific reflexes to integrate. Many of our kids are born C-section or premature. And so sometimes they have a challenging time with movements because they didn't have these ones automatically triggered because of the natural birth process. But the cool thing is you can always start rhythmic movements. You can always start these movements with your kiddos no matter how they were born or how early they were born. So I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, what happened? This is happening more and more for many different reasons. Sometimes we really are in a situation where that baby needs to be C-section. And then other times we're doing it out of convenience. But either way, you can still start rhythmic movements and help these kiddos if they're struggling. Okay, so these are these programmed automatic movements, right? Okay, and let's think about it. I've got a question for you today. What is your biggest concern with your child? And I'd like you to put this in the comments. Okay, so think about it. Is it attention? Like they have a hard time focusing, or impulsivity? Does your child struggle with self-regulation? With language, expressive language, the ability to maybe even keep eye contact? What's your biggest struggle? Is it meltdowns, right? Or aggressive behaviors? Okay. Go ahead and put in the comments here what it is your main struggle with your kiddo. Self-regulation. Awesome. Okay. So rhythmic movements are powerful for this. Yeah. Attention, impulsivity, emotional outbursts. Thank you. All of the above. Awesome. Right. And that's what Whole Brain Connections is really all about. It's where this all started before I even started doing these parenting coaching classes. I was teaching about movement. I was showing how this movement helps kids self-regulate. It helps them sleep better. It helps them focus better. Angie says, focus, social interactions, eye contact, coordination, random outbursts of sound. Yes, so rhythmic movement will really help your child really organize the brain and link up from the lower brain all the way up to the upper brain. Okay? Great. Perfect. So if you have a kiddo on the spectrum, inside this book, in fact, he wrote another book specifically about autism, and I have it right here. Let me grab it really fast. What? It's not here. Okay, sorry. I thought it was right there. Anyways, he has another book he wrote about autism and how to heal autism using rhythmic movements, diet, and other environmental things. Okay, so thinking about the things that your child is struggling with, every single one of them can be helped with the rhythmic movement. That's why it's key within the coaching program that we have, is that we highly, highly recommend families to begin these rhythmic movements with their kiddos. That's why I'm doing another workshop. So if you are in the coaching program, and you can join anytime you would like to, you just have to, there's a link in the feed and in the announcements. You can get right to that so you could join the coaching program. So it's key to helping our kids really self-regulate. For them to reach, to thrive, and to really grow, they need to be able to link up their brain. And over the next few weeks, we're gonna really explain why that is. And in the workshop, we're gonna go over the things that we're talking about this month, and we're gonna show you how to do the movements, how often to do them, in what rate, and how to find the time and ability to do these movements so they just fit into your schedule. They're like not a big deal. And honestly, for most families, as they begin to be consistent with these things, they just become a part of the evening, go to sleep time that they just won't even go back. Like they will never stop doing these until basically the child can learn themselves. And ultimately, that's what we're going for. You teach these movements, and as the child matures, their brain matures, and they get a little bit older, they should be able to do these as well. And in fact, that shows you how well the brain is organized by the ability of our child to be able to do these movements by themselves. So initially, we help do them for them. And then as they grow older, 8, 9, 10, 11, these ages, if they're able to do them smoothly, rhythmically, coordinated, symmetrical, then they can actually do these movements themselves. And you can do these movements as well. So usually first thing in the morning when I wake up, I have my phone and I set my 2-minute timer and I start with my first movement. And then when that rings, I go to the next movement, right? So it basically takes me 8 minutes to do the movements. Yeah. And I'm super ready for the day. Perfect. All right. Let's see. Jen, will you post the link to sign up for the early bird special on the sensory movement mini course 2.0? And it just comes from Whole Brain Gym. Just go to Whole Brain Gym. I connected up the link there. Can we do it in a group? Now, there are some movements, not these initial ones that I teach. There's some other movements that you could do as a group when you get more into crawling postures. The ones that I teach that help with self-regulation, focus, and attention, these ones have to be done by an adult one-on-one. Unless they're old enough to do it, but we want the movements need to be exact. Yeah, the movements need to be exact. So in this first phase of movements, these are ones that we do passively for our kids. We do it for our kids. Yeah. But inside the book, there are some other movements that that you can try as a group. But again, the key is that they are done specifically. And that's going to give the sensory input to wake up the brain, to create neural networks all throughout the brain so that, number one, the reflexes are integrated to postural reflexes and the nervous system is able to calm, we connect and mature the brain. Oftentimes, kids who have ADHD, honestly, just have an immature brain. Many parts of them function. They might be really coordinated. They might run and jump and be all over the place. Excuse me. But there's specific linking from the cerebellum that's connected to our ability to move smoothly and the cortex, and our language. So if we're not getting the specific input of this movement, we're not able to access every part of our brain. And so our kids are kind of like, our brains are amazing that we'll find these other ways of getting around and trying to figure it out. But if we want our brains to be really, our kids' brains to be efficient, to be linked up well, communicating well, which calms the nervous system because they don't feel like they're in fight or flight all the time. Doing these movements specifically is the way that it does that. The name of the book is called, right here, Rhythmic Movement Method. But this is what it looks like. Yeah. Okay, so let me tell you what we're going to be studying about the next few weeks, and then I want to talk about chapter 2 of this book. Okay. So next week, I'm going to be drawing you a model of the different parts of the brain that we're going to be specifically talking about how these movements link up that part of the brain. And when that part of the brain's linked up, how it helps our kids with their learning, to help them flourish, to help them self-regulate, to reduce aggression, okay, to calm that nervous system. We're going to be talking about the brain stem, the limbic part of our brain, which is like the emotional part of our brain. And then we're going to be talking about the cortex and the prefrontal cortex. And I'm going to talk about how each movement, what it does for each part of the brain. Okay. And so for many of us, we might have come to this group because our kids are struggling in school, or maybe they're not able to make friends. Maybe they're just too rough. Maybe they're just, their tempers are really short and they don't really have a lot of empathy for other people. These are all things that the rhythmic movements can help a lot with, okay? But what that is that we're focusing on really at the top of that pyramid that I showed you in the workshop. There's a developmental pyramid. And if I had it up, I would show you. But technically, I'll post it in the feed. But at the very bottom of this developmental pyramid are rhythmic movements and reflex integration. And if those things aren't handled in our kiddos, whether it's because of birth process or neurodevelopmental challenges, or maybe they had some traumatic brain injury, or they just weren't able to move around a lot when they were little, maybe they were kind of contained and maybe car seats a lot or walkers a lot, so they just didn't have this natural movement. Whatever that is, what happens is the brain isn't developing like building blocks. And so you're trying to get up to the top where there's emotional regulation and learning and reading and things like that. But this foundation of that pyramid might be off, might be a little shaky. So it's hard to be able to help our kids with these other areas of their life because this foundation isn't as strong. All right. Thank you. Yeah, here's the thing. Yes, so my mini course is called Sensory Movement Mini Course, right? Because I wanted people to realize that it's connecting the sensory systems. We're using the sensory systems and the movement to help develop the brain. So my mini course is called Sensory Movement Mini Course. The actual book that teaches about it is called Rhythmic Movement Method. Yeah. Perfect. All right. We talked about who's it for, how does it work, when do we use it? It would be daily. This is input that a child needs daily. So it's connecting the sensory input from our body as well as movement. So when we do these movements, the kids are getting tactile, they're getting vestibular input, which is the inner ear, our balance input, as well as proprioceptive, right? Which is the ability to feel our body in space. So that's like muscles and joints and the sensory that comes in through the muscles and joints. What's really amazing about this is that as we do these tiny baby movements, we're getting this gentle sensory input. It wakes up the brain. Okay, you're getting this input to help build more neural networks, so there's lots more communication happening. And we're also able to help with muscle tone. So you might have a kiddo that's kind of has weak muscle tone. And that is often a sign that they need more sensory input from rhythmic movements. So if a child hasn't gotten these rhythmic movements, right, this input, enough of it, oftentimes they could be very, very stiff and they have a hard time relaxing, okay? And you can see this in kids with cerebral palsy, and things of that nature, or just some kids, especially on the spectrum, can be have really kind of tight muscles and joints, and they have a hard time relaxing. These rhythmic movements really help with calming the nervous system and also giving that sensory input so that the neural networks build in a way that it relaxes the muscles, and it actually helps build the right muscles. Right? So when you're doing these movements, you're actually, eventually when the child is doing it themselves, they will start building the right muscles to be able to move into those postural reflexes and to be more coordinated and more balanced, and to be able to feel their body in space so they're not as rough with their friends, or they don't hold the pencil so hard that they, dig into the paper. So we have all the sensory input, and it goes through the cerebellum, and the rhythmic movements really are connected to the cerebellum. And that's connected to the motor cortex of our brain. All right, so you're giving this input through the movement, so the vestibular, the proprioceptive, and the tactile, and that helps build up the brain. I hope that's not too much, but that's technically what we're going to be talking about this whole month. Awesome. And we'll be going in deeper, especially. So next week, we're going to be talking about the brain. Then the week after that, we're going to be talking about ADHD, focus, executive function, their connection to reflexes that have not integrated, and rhythmic movements. So if you have a kiddo that has impulsivity, has a hard time being flexible, is challenged with their executive functioning, we're going to be talking about that on the 15th, okay, the 15th of this month. Get a drink here. On the 22nd, we're going to be talking about autism, reflexes, these rhythmic movements, and I'm going to touch on a little bit about food intolerances and how when our kiddos are sensitive, especially kids on the spectrum, to gluten and dairy, which I have not gone into a lot in this group really at all, and I have a couple great experts that I'm working on having come in here. But what happens is, for many kiddos, gluten and dairy actually create inflammation in the body and inflammation in the cerebellum, okay, which triggers a lot of things, especially for kids on the spectrum. So on the 22nd, we're going to specifically talk about kids who are on any part of the spectrum, whether they have a diagnosis or not. If you think, I think my kid might have a little, might be on the spectrum, that week you're going to really, really love. You're going to love it anyways, because you're going to learn more about how the brain works. And then on the 29th, right, the 29th, we're going to be talking about learning. Okay, reading, dyslexia, dysgraphia. We're going to be talking about kids who struggle with math, kids who struggle to just learn in the classroom and stay focused in the classroom, and reflexes and rhythmic movements. How these rhythmic movements help kiddos be able to read better and to focus better, to line up their numbers better when they're doing their, long division. Okay, all of this stuff goes back to the development of the brain and the sensory system. And these rhythmic movements are just these gentle, lovely, beautiful movements that have been programmed into a baby's brain so that they make these movements at certain timings to build up the brain so they can eventually sit up, get up on their hands and knees, walk, and all of that develops the brain so they can finally really have access to that higher level thinking so that we can plan for the future and we can, think about things in advance so that our kids can remember maybe what the family rules are instead of just forgetting them. Okay, so I'm really excited about the next few weeks and what we're going to be talking about. Let me see anything else. All right. So glad I found this group. Looking forward to more support with the coaching program. So much of what you're saying speaks directly to my struggles with my kiddo has. Yes. So Kirsten, and I'm so glad that you're in the coaching program. You are definitely in the right place, and starting to implement these movements is going to have incredible results. Now, for many kids, and I say this every time I talk about it, some kids, these movements is too much sensory input for them. They might not even want you to touch their back. There's actually reflexes in the back, and if they are not integrated, our kiddos have a hard time sitting in their chair. They don't like to have any tags on the back of their pants. Maybe they only wear sweatpants, right? And so for some kids, you can't even actually touch them to do the rhythmic movements. So what I asked my clients to do at that point is to basically just gently push on their bed for those few minutes. And we talk about if for some kiddos, you might see some more negative behavior come out, which is very normal. And so as you are still consistent, you kind of lay off just a little bit, but you still give that input, just less of it. Then the brain will help kind of work that thing out. But oftentimes you'll see a little bit of a flare up with the kiddos as their brain is kind of reorganizing itself and putting all those blocks in place. So if your kiddo doesn't actually want you to touch them, like that's too much input, then I would suggest pushing on the bed. And we talk about this in the whole workshop, right? So I can't really do that here in this teaching environment, but in the workshop, we'll have videos, we'll walk you through it. It'll be awesome. Okay. My 8-year-old has been saying lately his back is in a lot of pain and hurts, as well as he has trouble writing because his hand hurts. So doing more of these could help that. I believe he is super tense because he is rough when he is playing. Now, he might be rough while he's playing because his muscles are so tense. So in this workshop, Candy is going to also be teaching you some poses that help build the strength in your hands. So kiddos who have hands that get tired, it can be reflexes, which the rhythmic movements help integrate that. And it can also mean that you need to strengthen the muscles in their hands and their fine motor skills. Okay, so yes, the rhythmic movements will help for that. And in the workshop, we're going to be going over rhythmic movements as well as poses that can help our children pay attention, regulate themselves, and strengthen their arms and hands. This is fantastic info. My admins would love to hear this. Is it available for replay? Yes, it just stays within this group. So you can access it here in this group. So you just, whatever admins want to watch it, then just have them join the group. Yeah. Yes, my son has trouble with dyslexia and focusing, hard time with math and all that you're saying. Sometimes kiddos, so this is the stuff I totally geek out about because this is why I got into what I get into. So I'm so happy to share this stuff. Our vestibular system, which is connected to the auditory system in the hardest bone in our body, okay, is in there because our vestibular system, which helps through seeing and also hearing, we use this balance system to know where sounds are coming from, to know how to look up at a chalkboard and look back down at our paper, right? Our ability to walk through space and avoid, a tree. So our vestibular system is connected to all the other sensory systems except smell. Smell is the only sensory system that goes automatically to the olfactory bulb in the brain. That's why smells are really, really powerful. There is no filter for smells. Smells goes right to the brain, doesn't go through the cerebellum or through the vestibular system. Okay, so these movements help fine tune the vestibular system and fine tune the cerebellum. Okay, and so oftentimes if our vestibular system, which is our balance system, isn't finely tuned because it hasn't gotten the input and hasn't created all of those neural networks, sometimes it's hard for our kids to actually line up numbers on a page. Sometimes what we think is dyslexia or we call as dyslexia, is a communication between our eyes and our balance system. And so when we look at a book, the letters look like they're moving. Okay. And so these rhythmic movements help organize the sensory system so that our kids can actually read better. It helps them learn how to read across a page easier. Lots of things start to improve. Now, does it improve in like 1 week? No, but we're on a journey and our kids are going to be in school for a long time. So each day, if you do a few minutes of these movements, it will help with all of those things as well. Awesome. Okay. Every night he asked me to rub his back and hands. So excited for what Candy has to say. Yeah, I'm so glad that Candy's come on board because I've been teaching all of this and she joined the coaching program back in September because she wanted to learn reflexes and rhythmic movements. And after she started working with all of her clients and has had phenomenal results with them. And so I asked her to come on board and be one of our coaches. So in the coaching program, you have access to Candy each month. We have live coaching calls. So as you start implementing these movements, if you're a part of the monthly coaching program, you also get to ask questions to Candy and get input. You can show us your video. We'll be on live. We can, kind of correct you on those movements and things like that. So you can have additional support for that when you join the Thrive Academy. Okay. I have a child that asks me for pressure on his arms and legs. Yes, so that's proprioception. If your child wants pressure, he's looking for input, which calms the nervous system. So, you can do it with your hands like this. And I tell a story about my daughter when we would be in church, my uniquely wired daughter, she really had a hard time sitting still. I thought she was ADHD. She wasn't. I realize now. She just had some sensory challenges. And so if I would kind of gently squeeze her arm and give her some input, it actually calmed her down so that she could stay there. If I told her to sit still, to be quiet, it didn't work. She would just throw a fit. It didn't work. So I had to find other ways. And that's one of the ways I learned from a friend of mine whose son had autism, that she says this deep pressure really helps calm the nervous system because you're giving the brain input so that the child knows where their body is in space. If you're not getting a strong input from your muscles, either because you have low muscle tone, your kiddo has low muscle tone, they're not going to feel their body moving because their muscles really aren't flexing. There's not very many there. And so that can create an underlying feeling of out of control. Puts them in fight or flight. They want to get up and move around because then they'll feel better, right? How many kids get up out of their chair in their classroom because they just can't sit still? And for some of those kiddos, it's because they can't feel their body. They're not getting the input, their proprioceptive input, right? And so even giving yourself a hug or squeezing your arms can help calm you. Many kids tap their foot so that they know where their foot is in space. It calms them down. They're getting input. They know where their leg is. They're like, okay, I feel grounded now. I know where my leg is. Some kids love to chew on clothes or chew on items. Again, that's another way that a child knows where their body is in space. They know where their mouth is. They can feel that input. Okay. The rhythmic movements helps give this gentle input over time to organize the brain, calm that nervous system, build the muscles, okay, so that they're getting a finely tuned input of sensory stuff. Okay, let's see. Could that help with an adult? My husband has dyslexia. Could it help him with his struggles? It's really bad that he won't read and has glasses. Okay, so I have a whole nother book that eventually I would love to have the author of. It was called Feeling Smarter and Smarter. So for adults, I would suggest that book. And I don't know who you are because I can't see. You have to give me permission to see your name. Whoever asked about their husband with the dyslexia, on the feed, it says give StreamYard permission. If you click on that, I can see who your name is and I can link you to a book that could be really helpful. Yes, these movements will help your husband. It will take time, like a few months of doing this, but yes, absolutely would help him. benefits for adults as well. Because they integrate reflexes, and many of our reflexes can actually come back. So eventually what happens is you have these programmed movements in the body that keep a baby alive. Now, if that child doesn't get enough input for whatever reason, maybe they don't like to crawl around. Maybe they were always in a walker, right? They don't get that same input, so their brain isn't connected efficiently, okay? And the brain isn't totally mature as it could be if it got all that sensory input. So what can happen as an adult, you could have a really hard time driving a car. So my daughter, who is an adult, has an active reflex. Now she's 23 and she's not really that interested in integrating it. But this is the kiddo that, when she's driving, if she turns her head to look over her shoulder, her arms automatically move. Okay, that's a reflex. And that's supposed to be integrated. You're supposed to be able to have your arms here, turn your head without your body moving that same way. Okay. And so I asked her, because she's gotten into 3 accidents, and she's my one that has some balance challenges and has some active reflexes. And so she says, well, Mom, I just don't turn my head when I drive. I can turn my head if I'm concentrating really, really hard, holding onto the steering wheel, knowing that I have to not move my arms and turn, then I'm okay. But generally, I just look in the mirror. Now, here's the thing. If you have a kiddo that still has active reflexes and they're trying to write or they're trying to do something, and every time they turn their head, right, or they move their leg a certain way, a reflex is activated. It can be very distracting and very difficult for them to even sit and write across a page because there might be active reflexes in the hands or some sensory challenges. Okay? Yes. Okay. I tried the squeezing of his arms up and down. He is hesitant of it and says it feels weird and tingles. Yeah. So here's the thing. One of the things about this input is to do it rhythmically, and not so much about this, but I would do it to where he enjoys it, and then stop. Do a few squeezes, like 4 or 5, and then stop and just say, notice what that feels like. And he says, it feels weird and it tingles, right? And then you ask him again, well, do you want me to do that again, right? And you can try it on another arm, or he can try it himself, okay? That's great sensory input, okay? Long term, the rhythmic movements is what's going to help integrate all of the sensory systems. But when he needs to calm himself, that input can be really, really helpful. So if your kiddo wants to calm down, he might not want to push the pause button or breathe. He might want to squeeze himself. Okay? He might want to do some jumping jacks, right? Okay, he might want to swing. Okay. Any concerns doing movements with someone whose reflexes are integrated? No. Nope. He has found through the hundreds and thousands of people that he's worked with that there are just really no side effects. The only real concern is if you have a child who has Down syndrome. Sometimes there's some instability in their cervical neck. And so you want to talk to their doctor if they have Down syndrome to start doing that. But he's worked with lots of families with cerebral palsy, with other movement challenges. And what he found is that as the body learns to move, language increases, cognitive ability increases. And so many scientists have found that movements develop the brain, but he specifically studied these rhythmic movements and what they've done for children and adults. So if they're integrated, nope. But if you're feeling like your child's kind of balanced and set up and there's really not a reason to do them, you don't need to do them. Other than for me, I do them because they calm my nervous system. Yeah. I like movement. It's one of my one of the things I do when I want to calm down. So the rhythmic movements for me, for sure, are helpful. No, you don't need to worry about that, about the integrated reflexes. Okay, perfect. All right, we're almost at the top of the hour. We went over the book, Rhythmic Movement Method. I'll talk about quickly one more time what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks, and then I'll post something today. Next week, we're going to be talking about the brainstem, the limbic system, and the cortex. So each level of the brain and how sensory input and these rhythmic movements help link the brain together and help mature the brain, okay? And then on the 15th, we're going to be talking about reflexes and attention challenges or executive functioning challenges, impulsivity, and how these rhythmic movements can help create the neural network, improve those things. On the 22nd, I'm going to be talking about autism, how the movements help in autism, as well as some about food intolerances. Okay, that comes from Dr. Blomberg's book as well. And then on the 29th, I'm going to be talking about learning and the rhythmic movements and how the rhythmic movements can help our kiddos who struggle with reading or writing or math, okay, or making friends, social emotional stuff, okay? And with all of that, I'm excited too. Like, I love reading books, and I just decided this year I want to do book studies because I think it's amazing. And plus, that inspires you to go get that book and start doing that. Fantastic. Thanks. My kids don't want to be left out and want to see if they like it. Honestly, there are areas that could be beneficial for each of them. Yes, and it's actually a wonderful way to connect. So one of the ways I generally connect with my kids is that I give them a back rub or rub their neck, and we're watching a movie. Like, when I'm relaxed and hanging out and we're all together, my kids want me to rub their back or rub their hands. Like, my kids love it when I rub their hands. Like, they just melt like butter. So these rhythmic movements are an incredible connection time as well, right? We know that our relationship is really dependent on our connection with our kids. So the rhythmic movements not only help develop the brain, but they develop connection and feeling like we belong. And it helps us as parents to show up with a heart of peace, to be able to help our kiddos with this. You're welcome. So welcome. I'm excited about the next 2 weeks. Same, going to be great insights and information. Absolutely. Love reading and think this is a great idea. Book studies are fun and helpful. Yes. Yes, super happy about this. I'm glad you guys are looking forward to this because I am for sure. So here's what I want to give you. I do have an assessment. So any of you that are interested in doing the whole brain gym assessment, it's the assessment that I would give to my clients in my gym to kind of determine if the rhythmic movements would be helpful for them. So I'm going to post that link. I think I already posted the link actually in the group. Let me see real quick. I want to show it to you guys just so you see what it looks like. I thought I posted it. All right, well, let me just grab it really fast. I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to put this in the group for you. Okay. And I'll show you what it looks like. Perfect. Let me hop in here and I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Yeah. Okay, so I think you're probably seeing my StreamYard. Okay, so here I posted this in the group, but this is a whole brain gym assessment, okay? And it's just a number of questions. There's actually a lot of questions. But if you would like to take this, it's going to help you know if these rhythmic movements could be helpful, okay? And this also shows signs of some need for sensory integration or active reflexes, okay? And I'm not going to read through all of these things, But basically what you'll do is you'll read through it and you answer, you always see this, you sometimes see it, or you never see it. Okay. So this is kind of like, a screener, so that you can better know if the rhythmic movements will be helpful. Okay. And then on this same thing, you can actually click on here and go to sign up for the workshop if you would like to come to the live workshop and learn all of these movements. Okay. Again, so if you get at least, I put here at least 6 or more of these statements, then it does show a preliminary sign of brain and sensory immaturity. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that. So that's within the group. If you would like to take that for your kiddo, if you have any other questions about this, the assessment, just let me know, and I can answer any other questions. But this is stuff I love to talk about. Like, I love to talk about sensory and brain things and how movement develops the brain and how we can, as parents, show up for our kids and help to help mature those things for them. Awesome. Okay, so the next few weeks will be all from the Rhythmic Movement book. Yes, it will be. Yep, exactly. Nope, same exact book. So if you, in fact, I didn't actually go over chapter 2 like I said I was going to do. So I'm going to, chapter 2 is called An Alternative Way of Regarding and Treating ADHD, among other things. He definitely focuses on ADHD because so many kids are being given medication for ADHD, saying that it is a lack of neurotransmitters in the brain. And for some kiddos, that's true. But he believes it's because lack of sensory input and the building up of the neural networks inside of the brain and the cerebellum. So he's saying that when you do these rhythmic movements, you actually are linking up the brain and maturing the brain so that the child can focus better, so they have less impulsivity, and there's not necessarily a need for medication. In this particular chapter, he talks about just how an infant's brain is underdeveloped and how neurons work and how linking them all up through rhythmic movement is possible and how it really affects kids on all different levels. And so I know I didn't actually open up to this page, but if you have this book, I would suggest you would read chapter 2. That's what we talked about today and what we have coming up for the rest of the month. Okay, everyone. See if you have any other questions. Yay, perfect. All right, everyone. It was wonderful being with you today. It was super fun to me. I look forward to next week. If you have any questions, please post them either in here or the hashtag Ask Amanda. That's going to be a really great place. Or you can put it in where the actual assessment is. So I'll check those areas to see if there's any questions. All right, awesome. We'll talk to you guys later.